I'm going to talk to you about internet voting, and I am the program manager for a company called Smartmatic, and I think it's worth introducing who Smartmatic are. We're the world's largest election technology company, and we produce solutions that enhance and improve all aspects of the election process, whether that's from voter registration systems in developing countries, through to services to transport election technology equipment out to big projects. All aspects of the electoral process we produce technology to support. And when I say we're the biggest, I think our achievements stand alone in terms of what we've done, in terms of any other company. We have enabled 3.7 billion votes to be counted on our platforms. We've produced technology that's gone into nearly 800,000 polling stations worldwide. We have deployed 275,000 voting machines and many other achievements. But the one achievement we're most proud of is the fact that we have delivered 100% successful elections. And I think that's really important when we talk about technology. We're not talking, it's not a technology project, it is an election. And the vehicle with which the election is successfully delivered is the technology solution. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this is all the election is successfully delivered is the technology solution. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this is all about robust elections, giving people the chance to vote and to participate in the democratic process. Okay, and finally, we've just run the world's biggest election technology project in the Philippines. I don't know if any of you have observed this, but we deployed nearly 100,000 machines in the Philippines into polling stations. We collected the results from those polling stations, accumulated them at various different levels, and the Philippines now has one of the most fraud-free, most rapid, most accurate election processes in the world, thanks to the forward-thinking nature of their electoral commission and the fact that they now do that with technology. But obviously, we're here to talk to you today about internet voting, and we are a key leading provider of internet voting for governments and for electoral management bodies. So, I think you probably know that the country that has the best experience, the most proven, longest-standing experience of internet voting is Estonia. And Estonia has been voting online since 2005, and they've so far run 8 nationwide elections using internet voting. So the Estonian experience, what makes it quite, I think, unique in some respects, is the fact that the technology, the innovation that the Estonian, the VVK, the Electoral Commission there, have deployed is very forward-thinking. It's not only very secure, but it's also very transparent. And I think it's important to understand that the properties of security, i.e. making something very locked down, ensuring that nobody can attack it or tamper with it, need to be balanced with the fact that electoral systems need to be very open so people can examine and see that those systems have operated correctly. So the Estonian solution is quite unique in that sense. And what Smartmatic have done is we've partnered with a company called Cybernetica, who are the developers of that original solution, to form our own internet voting division with a mission of taking that best practice that Estonia has delivered and bringing it to other governments worldwide. That doesn't mean making them vote in the way that Estonia votes, but it's bringing those key technology elements, those key protocols and the experience that Estonia has, and allowing other electoral commissions globally to understand how that works and being a kind of vision, if you like, of best practice. So far this year, Smartmatic, we've been very delighted to be involved in a number of elections. I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of some of those elections. This was one that we conducted in a municipality in Chile called Maipú, and you can see an example on the screen of the user experience, the ballot. And in this instance, what this municipality wanted to do was to allow citizens in the different boroughs to vote on different initiatives, okay? So there was a certain amount of money that could be allocated to support a certain number of projects. And they gave it over to the citizens, to the voters, to allow them to make a decision on that. Next one, please. This was another project that we've done this year. It was in the United States. It was for the state of Utah, for the GOP, the Republican Party, who wanted to do online voting to nominate their presidential candidate. So again, it's a slightly different look and feel in terms of the user interface. You can see the GOP logo there, and you can see the 3 candidates. At that time, I think there were 3 candidates left. But you know, one of the great things about internet voting is that you notice there's a very distinction between the Utah ballot there and the Chilean ballot. You can create these really rich user experiences which are engaging, which allow people, for example, with visual impairments to actually vote with a lot more ease than you can with traditional paper ballots. And I think that it's important that, you know, we are living in a time where all of us transact on these devices, on our smartphones, on our mobile phones and tablets, and we consume services every day. So this kind of notion of having to go to a polling station or going to a consulate or an embassy if you're an overseas voter to make your mark on a paper ballot with a pencil, it's very much at odds with how we live our lives today. I'm not saying for 1 minute that polling stations will ever disappear. I don't believe they do, that they will, and I don't think they should. But we've got to be doing something that uses technology to help people engage in the democratic process. And I'm a strong believer that when you compare internet or what we call proxy voting, so nominating somebody else to vote the way that you want to vote, internet voting is more secure, it's more accessible, it's more trustworthy, and it's more transparent than those mechanisms. And hopefully the next few slides will convince you of those thoughts. So before we dive into those slides, I think it's important to...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. One thing for you, if you please move as quickly as you can to Estonia.
Okay, well...
And I have another one for those who are in the back, because the screens, pentru cei din spate.
Okay, well...
And I have another one for those who are in the back, because the screens, pentru cei din spate, for those who are in the back, because the screens are small, pentru că ecranele sunt mici, poate vreți să
plenty of available seats in the front rows for you to be able to watch the presentation, because this is the climax of our conference, how things happen.
To come in front of the room because the screens are small, because we reach the vital point of the presentation, which is how it works in Estonia.
Okay. Before we dive into the Estonian system, thank you very much. I just want to obviously introduce Lucas, who will talk very much about the Estonian solution. I will show now technologically how it works, because I think this is a key thing. So, as I say, before we dive into the Estonian system, there are some things we need to remind ourselves, and that is that election solutions or elections should be accessible, they should be secure, and they should be transparent. And I think you can achieve that perfect sweet spot of strong security, transparency, and accessibility with internet voting. So, with no further ado, this is how the Estonian internet voting system works. And I'm going to talk about some of the properties that Jordi mentioned. So you're going to see on that slide there things like cryptography, verifiability, mixing, These are all terms which Geordie has suggested should be present in an internet voting system, and I'll explain firstly that they are present in the Smartmatic internet voting system, and I'll explain firstly that they are present in the Smartmatic internet voting system and why they are important and how they work. Okay, so the first at the top of the slide there you can see the first step, which is authentication. So this is the process whereby the voter proves that they are that person. Okay? In Estonia, how they do this with their smart card, which is a digital card that identifies the individual and can be used to access all public systems. Okay? Now they are rolling out what's called mobile ID, which is a mobile phone-based version of that smart card, but that is used to access the internet voting platform and to identify the voter. In our system, as well as supporting those key authentication, mobile ID and electronic ID, we also support biometric systems. So let's say, for example, you are a European Union citizen overseas. You can register to vote, and using your mobile phone, taking a selfie and comparing that with your passport, looking at those two images, we can verify your identity as a voter if we have access to, for example, the passport system or some other form of documental information. So you've got a much more robust system for authenticating and really proving who those people are. But coming back to the Estonian system and how our system works, when the voter has authenticated themselves, they access the ballot, they select their candidates in a very, very simple manner, and Lucas will show a video of the Prime Minister of Estonia voting online. Very, very good, very simple to understand video. But once the voter accesses the candidate list, they mark the ballot and they then vote. And when they vote, that ballot is encrypted, okay? So that information, those clear preferences of who I voted for, are encrypted. They're then digitally signed with the identity of me as a voter, and this is like an electronic version of postal voting. So you have the vote wrapped in an envelope, digital envelope, which is then wrapped in another digital envelope, which is sent to down a secure channel to a secure server, okay? And you can see these steps in the process up here. I apologise, this is quite hard to visualise, but all of these presentations I think will be shared with everybody afterwards, and if there are any questions we'd be happy to explain to you what happens. But the vote is then sent to this secure server, okay? Now, if I'm a voter, I want to be assured that my vote has reached that server, and it's reached the server in a manner that convinces me that nobody has tampered with that as I sent it across the internet. And that is what we call voter verifiability. So this process whereby a voter checks that what was sent to the server was actually what they cast, proving that nobody has tampered with that. And the way that is done in Estonia is with a smartphone. So once the voter has finished voting on their computer, they're presented with a QR code, a receipt code, and Geordie mentioned this. Then what they can do is they take their cell phone and with a separate application, they scan the QR code, and this performs a lookup on the server and shows if the voter wants the preferences, who they voted for, okay? So it allows you to get an assurance that nobody has tampered with your vote as it was transited across the internet. Now, one of the other properties that Estonia believes in, and I think this is a very, very good one, is reducing voter coercion, i.e. ensuring that nobody can make you vote a certain way. And the way they do that in Estonia is that they allow what they call multiple session voting. So if I'm a voter and I'm at home and somebody comes and says, you've got to vote for Nigel Farage. Not that anybody would. I can vote, and then when that coercer has gone, I can then log into the system again and recast my vote. Okay? So this process of multiple session voting removes voter coercion. It removes vote buying, because if, for example, I'm a candidate and I want proof that somebody has voted for me, okay, that voter could then go and vote again. There is no proof that person has voted for me. So you eliminate voter coercion, you eliminate vote buying, and you eliminate vote selling. And I think that is quite unique in terms of remote voting. So we think that's a really, really good process. Now, of course, the principle of one person, one vote still stands. So it's your last vote that was in the system which counts, okay? All of your other previously cast votes are put aside, and they are not decrypted, and they're not counted, okay? That's a really, I think, an important thing to understand. So that's the voter verifiability. The next stage, after the election has closed, we have this box that says mixing. And again, this is one of the concepts that Geordie mentioned. So this is the process of breaking the correlation between the voter and their vote. And it's like shuffling up a ballot box, okay? So what happens is the outer digital envelope, which has the digital signature, is stripped off, okay, leaving you with an encrypted vote. Now, that vote is anonymized. You don't know who that encrypted vote relates to, which voter. So we do that stripping off of that outer envelope. Then we initiate this mixing, which is the shuffling of the votes, which breaks the correlation between the votes that came in, the order of the votes that came in, okay? So you ultimately end up with a stack of randomized, fully encrypted votes, okay? Then we have a decryption process in which members of an electoral board have to come together, and only when they come together can you decrypt those votes. So normally in that instance, that group consists of different members from different political parties, members of the media, members of the press, members of the electoral management board, who all play a role in overseeing that decryption process. So there can be no accusations by a political party that they have not been witnesses to that process. They are all in different political parties, members of the media, members of the press, members of the electoral management board, who all play a role in overseeing that decryption process. So there can be no accusations by a political party that they have not been witnesses to that process. They are all involved in the process, okay? And that, again, is another way of enhancing the transparency of the electoral system, okay? So then we end up with this list of decrypted votes, which are then counted electronically. Because they're counted electronically, mistakes aren't made. Tired human beings counting pieces of paper make mistakes. And one of the accusations against online voting or electronic voting is that, well, if you do a recount, the result's the same. That's a good thing. The only reason you have recounts in paper-based elections is because you're not sure of the outcome. So one of the advantages of online voting is the fact that when you do a recount, the result is still the same. So you get that 100% accuracy over and above any manually counted paper-based system. Finally, you'll also notice down the bottom here we've got some concepts, again, that Geordie introduced, this concept of cryptographic proofs. And these are pieces of mathematical evidence which show that some of these processes are operating correctly. Again, so you're enhancing the transparency of the system and you're giving auditors the ability to really take a very deep dive into the system and see that everything is working correctly. So I know that's a very technical diagram, and I apologise for that. And if it's difficult to see, as I say, these presentations will be shared with you, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions as to how these key steps all hold together and the benefit that they bring. So, again, coming back to the earlier slide, I think it's important to understand when you think about internet voting compared to other forms of remote voting, when you think about accessibility, security, and transparency, I genuinely believe that these are all people to vote, and that is particularly useful if you are a voter with disability who can't get to the polling stations, okay? Or you can't get to the polling stations because you're working overseas or whatever, okay? You can support multi-language user interfaces, so, you know, making a ballot that works for all different nationalities can be easily achieved. The user experience can be made simple. So let's say, for example, you have a complex preferential voting system, which, as you probably know, often voters make mistakes when they are voting with preferential voting systems. With strong user experiences, you can help voters minimize those mistakes and make them, or help them vote correctly according to the rules of the election. So you have no overvoting, no undervoting, and no accidental spoiling of those ballots. You can also, in our system, have user interfaces which work with audio browsers. So if you're a blind, visually impaired voter who can't get to the polls, okay, you can access the ballot. You don't see the ballot, but you can listen to the ballot, okay, using an audio browser. And you can vote with the same level of independence and privacy as any other voter, okay? And the same if you are physically impaired and you use devices such as an eye retina scanner or a peripheral, a hardware switch, you can vote. You can vote with the same level of independence and privacy. Again, there's lots of points here, so I'm just going to skip through these very quickly. But in terms of security, internet voting is much more secure than any other form of remote voting. Postal voting, your means of privacy protection are a piece of paper, an envelope. Is an envelope more secure than strong encryption and digital signing? It's not. Internet voting is much more secure, much more secure. Okay? And finally, transparency. We said earlier on that there is this concern with, if you make a system very, very secure, you limit the ability for somebody to look inside and to prove that those security is to protect the privacy of the vote are actually working correctly. So if you look at, for example, what Estonia has done with smartphone-based voter verifiability, that's enhancing the transparency. That is allowing the voter to really believe and to prove that what they have cast is the right vote. It's the vote that they meant to cast. We've employed blockchain technologies in our solution that allow that distribution of trust of the ballot box and allow people to look and to ensure that no votes were tampered with, no votes were deleted, no votes were changed, no bogus votes are added. And again, I think one of the advantages of technology, or one of the advantages of internet voting, is that we can take advantage of these new developing technologies, such as the blockchain, which really help improve the integrity of the electoral process. So we talked about zero-knowledge proof cryptographic tools. We've talked about auditability. And one of the other things that you can do with internet voting is you can allow independent people to review the source code to demonstrate and to show that it is operating correctly, source code to demonstrate and to show that it is operating correctly and that everything is working as it should be. So are we talking about something internet voting is you can allow independent people to review the source code to demonstrate and to show that it is operating correctly and that everything is working as it should be. So are we talking about something that's in the future? We're not. We're talking about technologies that exist today, that have been used for 10 years. This isn't just a dream. This really does happen now. we should be thinking about internet voting as not something that is for the future. This is the now. So we should be pushing very, very hard if we are seeking to be engaged in the democratic process. And again, I genuinely believe that compared to any other form of remote voting, internet voting is more secure, it's more accessible and transparent than any other form of remote voting. And finally, I think this is a really interesting report that was published in May, and this was a report published by, it was called Potential Challenges of E-Voting in the EU, a study for the AFCO committee. This was published in May, and one of the conclusions in this report was that internet voting has been implemented successfully and has gone beyond the trial stage, okay? Internet voting for the European parliamentary elections could be built on the Estonian case. So this isn't just me informing you, this is, you know, people in Europe really are starting to think that internet voting is the right way that we should be enfranchising expatriates. So I'm going to finish. Thank you very much for allowing me the time to talk, and I appreciate any questions that we might have after this event. Thank you.